Good evening. I'd like to welcome all visiting today. Currently I'm going to talk to you about blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. The first thing that I thought when I accepted this message is, what does the word meek really mean? The Greek word for meek is puros. After gathering some information from a book, I found that meek means quiet, gentle, easily imposed on, controlled, and as an internal strength of character. In a video that I watched, a lady said that a meek person is someone who has given their will over to God and have given up all attempts to make their own lives right with God, and hands it over to God and let God be the ruler of their lives. So who is Iron Man? In the Marvel universe, he is a strong leader. People like him. People follow him because he's an awesome fighter and he has really big muscles. He fights for what he thinks is right, and at the end of the day, he's one of the good guys. And the good guys always win. But in saying this, Iron Man is also arrogant and single-minded and proud of his accomplishments. But in the real universe, we also look for the good guys, the powerful and the strong, because that is what the world is telling us to look for in good people. But Jesus says in Matthew 11:28-30, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Jesus is opposite to what the world expects of a winning leader, because how often do you hear Bible stories of Jesus getting really angry and flexing his muscles? Not very often. You hear or read much different stories, such as Jesus washing his disciples' feet and telling parables of the Good Samaritan, where the unexpected happens. John Wesley says of this passage of Scripture, "Take my yoke, believe in me. Receive me as your prophet, priest, and king. For I am meek and lowly in heart, meek towards men, lowly towards God, and I shall find rest. Whoever therefore does not find rest in soul is not meek and lowly. The fault is not the yoke of Christ, but in you, who has not taken it upon yourself. Neither is it possible for anyone to be discontent, but through the want of meekness." As followers of Jesus, we want to become more like Jesus. The world makes fun of the meek, but the truth is, meek is not weakness. Meek can also be described as not much anger, not too little anger. Following the Beatitudes, Jesus says in Matthew 5:38-42, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you." Only just the other day, as I got home from work, I was just about to start working on this very message, and my brother Andrew thought it would have been a great idea to be a pain and make fun of me and stir me up, simply because he had an audience. As I was about to walk up the stairs, he yelled out in a loud voice, "Make me a coffee." He was expecting me to get cross, but I didn't. I kept my cool and I made him one. He continued to try and rev me up while I was making his coffee, but I still kept my cool. It's the same when Jesus was saying, "Turn the other cheek." I could have fought back at Andrew, but instead I stayed cool. As the passage of scripture says in Matthew 5:44, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." I honestly don't hate my brother, but this is what power under control is. Staying cool and not dropping my attitude. Jesus wanted us to stand up to our enemies with gentle anger rather than fighting back. Philippians 2 verses 8. "And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on the cross." In a commentary that I read, it explains that Jesus' humbleness this way. The example of Jesus is set before us. We must resemble him in his life if we would have the benefit of his death. Notice the two natures of Christ, his divine nature and human nature, who begin from the form of God, partaking in the nature as the eternal and only begotten Son of God, had not thought it a robbery to be equal with God and to receive divine worship from man. His human nature, he becomes like us in all things except sin. Thus, low of his own will, he stooped from the glory he had with the Father because of the world was. Christ's two states of humiliation and exaltation were noticed. From the moment that they arrested Jesus, Jesus had the opportunity to fight back, but he didn't. He chose to stay obedient towards God. So who is it that you see is the vulnerable and powerless that we need to encourage? At my church, the Impact Youth team sees it week in, week out of at-risk teens who crave the love of God. They come because they know that it is a safe place for them. Only just a few Friday nights ago, in small groups, we were talking to the youth about good, healthy relationship. Many of the youth have experienced anger in their families and friends, but I suggested to my group another way to be a better person towards someone, which was to show meekness. Sadly, the world is telling our younger generation to fight back. That is practically the response that they told me. So please keep them in your prayers throughout the coming weeks for this generation to have a change of heart and mind. My church also runs a community lunch on a Wednesday. The people that are hungry or lonely, which have heard so many testimonies from the teams that coordinate the lunch, and also the open door ministries at my church that operate through the church office, and also on a Sunday night service that my church has just started doing, which is different to a normal Sunday morning. These people are the ones in our local community. There are so many people outside those doors who need to know Jesus and who are hungry for the love of God. And as a church, we serve our community in meekness. Pride and arrogance has no place in the world, and certainly no place in discipleship. When people of God were expecting the Messiah, they were probably expecting someone like Iron Man or one of the other Avengers characters, because they are strong, fearless. For what they weren't expecting was a man called Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a donkey. You see, because the Avengers fight for what they want a lot, where Jesus is a man who has power under control. He knew the death that he was facing when he was faced in front of Pilate. So what is pride? Last semester I did a class at college called Spirituality for 21st Century Disciples. One of the lectures was on humility. In the class we had a whiteboard discussion to determine the difference between pride and humility. This was the result. Pride is being judgmental, blind, which is single-mindedness, self-depictive, which is thinking about being humble but really being proud, comparing ourselves to others, boasting, taking sole ownership of achievements or accomplishments, getting puffed up, big-headed, or my favourite, being full of yourself. Pride is the opposite from meekness. A meek person is someone who would take the shirt off his back or her back and give it to a homeless person, where a proud person would want a gold medal in return, or simply will not give them a shirt. As Christians, we can also be subject to being proud without even realising it. And we can let this pride consume us. Because being meek means to be gentle and having humility, which is having or showing no self-importance in one's rank, title and status. Or as C.S. Lewis describes it, as humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. The world doesn't expect power to be in meekness. They expect people with power to fight. Let's take the New Zealand Prime Minister as an example. When she gave her speech to the memorial service 24 days after the terrorism attack on the Muslim temple, she could have acted just like the Avengers and looked for an opportunity to fight. But instead, she acted with meekness, which is very clear in her speech, which also reflected in the Muslim community in the news article that was shared. There were words spoken by a community who, in the face of hate and violence, had every right to express anger, but instead opened their doors to let all grieve with them. What we saw was meekness encouraged communities. When we are humble, people feel safe. As a church, when we serve our community, we don't put ourselves above others or try to be people who have power. Instead, we serve with meekness, humbling ourselves, so people feel encouraged to join in community. Jesus did this when he served others and when he went to the cross for us. He loved us so much, he made a way for us to be in community with God and each other. As followers of Jesus, we live our lives not being like the Avengers, who are full of pride and arrogance, but be like Jesus, who humbled himself so that others would know the love of God. This is meekness, and Jesus said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Thank you for listening.